On the News Today desk this afternoon. Good afternoon, Chris. Thank you for your time on the desk.
Thank you very much, Kirshini.
This school in operation for 5 years, you say, how did it go undetected for this long, Chriselda?
Well, usually when you find these bogus institutions, yes, Kirshini, you'd find them in places like the Johannesburg CBD. But what we found today was a bogus institution, high school, masquerading as a high school and a tutorial centre, as you mentioned, in one of the leafy suburbs in Johannesburg and located close to one of the very prominent high schools in Johannesburg as well. So, you know, really undetected, not the usual, what you would find in the Johannesburg CBD itself, looking quite plush behind high gates and high walls and not suspecting anything. So you really had a number of people who were taken for a ride here, and at quite a hefty cost, at about 43,000 Rand per learner per year.
The MEC has been made aware of this. What happens now, and what's the next step? And will it be shut down with immediate effect?
Well, it has been shut down with immediate effect as we speak. The Department of Basic Education, the Gauteng department that is, was quite quick to respond to this. When we heard about the story, we contacted them and they were very willing to go on board and participate in this raid as well. So we went there, and immediately when we found the school also acknowledged that it was non-compliant, and essentially the MEC at that point had instructed his office to write an official letter to the institution and order them to shut down with immediate effect. Also to let the parents of those learners know that the school has now been shut. They have to be found alternative place because the school here has already started, and certainly the monies that were paid also need to be returned to the parents of those students.
Yes, we're already a month into the new academic year. Right. I mean, what is the financial implication for students who are already under strain, families already under strain in this subdued economic climate? Can you share some of those stories with us if you've spoken to some of the learners there?
Well, certainly massive. In particular, the one person that we spoke to, very concerned, stating that this student had already been at this institution for the past 2 years. So you can only imagine, if it's about 43,000 Rand per year, for 2 years, you can imagine how much that is, them losing well or close to 100,000 Rand. So the financial implications are quite hefty. The assurance that we did get from the Department of Basic Education, however, is that that money will be returned and the institution is not allowed to operate. We've actually seen the letter that the Department of Higher Education and Training has issued to the institution for them to stop operating immediately, or they will face criminal charges.
Chriselda, this has become a perennial problem, an annual problem.
Yes.
The start of the academic year, January, February, it does seem to be a time of heightened vulnerability for learners and their parents, their caregivers, etc. There does seem to be a gap here where we have to start raising awareness that just because a school or college is advertised on national radio or the newspaper doesn't mean that it is a legitimate one.
Well, certainly the department, well, the onus is on the department and parents themselves, because I must admit the Department of Higher Education and Training, in terms of the other bogus institutions, tertiary institutions that we bust over the past a couple of weeks, and this one, which is of course under the Basic Education Department, they've been on these drives. They've been on these drives for years, but also rely on parents to check, to call the Department of Higher Education and Training. There are toll-free numbers that you can call to find out if a school is simply listed on the database of the Department of Higher Education and Training or the Department of Basic Education. And it certainly took that one person who alerted the SABC to the story, that one telephone call, to realize only after 2 years that the monies they were paying were in vain, and that essentially their child was attending school for absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Chriselda Lewis, for your time on the SABC News Desk. Please do verify with the Department of Higher Education whether the college or school you intend to study at is indeed legally registered. Well, let's move on to some other news now. A Zimbabwean magistrate has released the country's prosecutor